Okay, so I just want to know, before we start, what's the verdict on the soup? Please, I won't be offended. You won't dash my dreams. What is the consensus on the soup?
Okay, let me
Yay or nay? Keeper or throwaway?
Yay.
Okay.
Yay?
You could have added more liquid also then.
Hold on.
What?
You could have added more liquid if it was vegetables then put it out.
Okay.
Like,
I'll
probably
say
just 'cause
the
everyone
last
took the
verdict,
liquid.
and I'll give you-
I think it should be more.
Okay.
It's probably just
Okay, so the soup is a yay. Also, Emily pointed out that the onions add to the salad. I want to say there's a strategy, by the way. The strategy is like this: you put the onions first at the bottom of the bowl, and then you put tomatoes on top of the onions. Why? Because the juice of tomato seeps down and helps, it gives more better flavor. You put a little oil on, and then it gets the flavor out of the onions better, rather than just tossing your onions in like some kind of criminal. That's not a good way to do things.
The technique, yes.
It's the technique.
Well, you always put onions in first when you cook anything.
Soaking it in lemon juice for like a long time.
You could do that.
Would that also infuse flavor?
Yeah, that would be good. You could quickle the onions if you want, but I didn't do that now.
What?
Quickle them. It's like a quick pickle.
Quick pickle,
I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
as they say.
He's like,
quickle. There's different ways to make pickled onions.
Cool.
One way you could do is you take a pot and you put a little bit of water and vinegar. I don't exactly know the amount. Like, let's say I'm gonna make this up. Do like a cup of water and a cup of vinegar, give or take, and put maybe like a tablespoon of sugar just to give a little bit of sweetness and some salt. Maybe a tablespoon of salt. I'm not sure how much salt. And then you heat up the water till it boils, until the salt and the sugar dissolve in it. Then you take a chopped up sliced red onion and you just pour the hot liquid on top of it, and then you let it sit, and then you're done. Those onions will quickle. They're good like in salad and stuff like that. But anyway, the soup was from a recipe from a cookbook called the Eucalyptus Cookbook, which is a restaurant in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim,
Wow.
with the chef Moshe Basson. And that was the soup. And next time I would maybe put a little bit less of the hot paprika for those who are having a hard time with the spicy. But it's healthy. It's got the beans. It's got the vegetables. Anyway, okay, guys, I'm excited to say we are at part 3 of the course from Possuk to Possuk, Mezuzah edition. We've been learning the last couple of weeks about Mezuzah in Halacha and in the Talmud and in the verse from all trying. My goal is really to try to always bring it back to the original Possuk, the original verse. So today, being that now we have passed Purim, I hope everyone had a great Purim. Since we have passed Purim, we are within the showdown. We're within the 30 days approaching Pesach, and the sages tell us that 30 days before a holiday, we should begin preparing for the holiday. Now, actually, just an interesting note is that the original reason for the preparation was because 3 times a year, we are enjoined to go to the holy city of Jerusalem, to the holy temple, and bring korbanot, and bring offerings. Usually it translated sacrifices, I'll just say offerings. And since there are so many halachot, so many laws about the different animals and blemishes that would disqualify blemishes, that would not disqualify the animal, etc. So 30 days before the holiday, you're actually supposed to start preparing, checking your animals, and so on and so forth to see if they have any blemishes. Nowadays, we don't have a temple, although we could still go to Jerusalem. We don't have a temple. So now we learn the halachas of Pesach. So we're going to infuse today's part 3 of from Possuk to Possuk Mezuzah edition, and we're going to call it Pesach and Mezuzah edition. And we're going to combine the 2 things. How's that working out for you over there with the pita dipping in the soup? How's that working out?
It's logistically not great, but taste-wise, it's good.
You can take your spoon and spoon it on.
It's not a bad idea.
Okay, let's go back to the same verse, the same pasuk that we keep talking about the last 2 weeks. Uchsavtom al mezuzos beisecha uvisharecha, and you should write them upon the doorposts of your house and of your gates. And we've been discussing what does it mean, uchsavtom, to write, what does it mean on the mezuzos, on the doorposts. And next week we're going to continue focusing more on the mezuzos part, the word that we translate as doorposts, also translates as mezuzah, right? Beisecha, of your house, uvisharecha, and of your gates. Now today, we're going to focus on the penultimate word. Yes, I'm testing your SAT knowledge.
Second.
The
plus.
second,
Ah, thank you.
no, it was all Jesse.
You said it also? Oh, you said?
Yeah, I said it fast.
You said it first. The penultimate word is not the last. That's the ultimate word will be the last word. The penultimate is the next to last word. So the penultimate word is Pesach of your house. And we're going to talk about that today. Let's take a look in the Gemara. This is from Tractate Menachos, Menachos 34a. The Gemara asks the following. And beforehand, the Gemara says, and we're actually going to talk about this more next week, God willing, that a mezuzah has to be affixed on which side of the door, the right or the left?
Right.
The right side. Everyone agree, the right side? How do you tell which is the right side? Is that the right side or is that the right side?
On your way in.
On your way in. You're correct. How do you know that? Because everyone does that way, right? How do you know that it's on the right side upon entering?
Oh.
Maybe it's upon the right side upon exiting. Where does that come from? You hear what I'm asking?
Well, I feel like Beit Hachem implies like your house that you enter, not that you exit. That'd be
Okay.
weird.
Okay, very good. Let's take a look at the Gemara. Hold that thought. Desanya. So what is the source for the requirement that a mezuzah be affixed on the right side? So we learned in a brayso, beischa, beisecha rather. The verse says your house, beisecha, and the sages give a little bit of a twist on the word, because really there's no vowels, there's no nikudot in the Torah. So a word that's spelled a certain way could be pronounced in different ways. Now, in terms of the contextual meaning, there's only one correct way to pronounce the word. But the sages have license to offer alternative interpretations. Alternative pronunciations by changing the nikudot, and therefore give new interpretations. So they say, beisecha, your house could be read bi'atecha or bi'asecha, you're entering. So the word beisecha for your house could be read alternatively with other nikudot, with other vowels, as bi'asecha, you're entering. That is, the mezuzah is on the right side upon entering. Now, that's the right. So the Gemara asks further, however, you want to say that we put our mezuzah on the right side. How do you know? How do you know it's on the right side? Maybe it's on the left. How do you know that it's on the right? Maybe it's on the left. So Talmud Leimar Beisecha. Let's go back to the original pronunciation of the word. Your house. What does your house say? Your house, that you enter your house, like Daniela was suggesting.
What?
You
Wait,
enter your
actually?
house.
I'm the Gemara.
Well, don't let it inflate your pride. Don't let it get you carried away.
It could have been the Gemara.
We are all the Gemara. And the Gemara is us.
Oh my God, stop. Okay.
Don't get carried away. Don't
Oh my
exaggerate.
God, I'm so excited.
1 second. So what do they say? But my Talmud. What does this come to teach us? The way you enter your house is from the right. What does that mean, from the right? You don't enter the house from the right. You enter the house through the door. The door is not on the right. If the door is on the left side of the house, it makes a difference. It's on the right side of the house. It's behind the house. It's on the side of the house. You don't enter from the right. You enter with the right. As the sages say here, that when you lift your foot to begin walking, you lift your right foot first. Therefore, the mezuzah is also affixed to the right side of the doorway, because that's the normal. There's always exceptions. That's the natural and most common way to enter the home, is by putting your right foot first. Aside from the fact that according to Kabbalah, you should always put the right, not just the Kabbalah, it's mentioned in Halach as well, you should always do the right first. So what does it mean? You should write on the doorpost of your house on the right side upon entering. Good so far? Okay. Now, I did promise you, and I really don't want to let you down, because then you'll never come back. I don't want to let you down, and we are going to talk about Pesach now. Let's take a look in the Gemara Masech, the Pesachim. That's page 4a, Daf Daled Omer Aleph. Bo minei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok. They raised the following question to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who was a great sage. They asked him the following question: if you rent a house to someone else on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, which is also known in plain English as
Start of Pesach.
Erev Pesach, not the start of Pesach,
The day before.
Erev Pesach, right?
Pesach.
Al mi livdoik, upon whom is it incumbent to search for chametz. There is a halacha that before Pesach, you have to search for chametz. You can't just glide into Pesach. You have to search for chametz. Why do you have to search for chametz?
Get rid
Because
of
if
it.
you find a gluskayata.
No. Getting rid of it is something else.
Mm.
Why do you have to
So
search
that
for
you
it?
don't have it in your midst on Pesach,
Just-
because if you find it, then you'll eat it.
Oh, because if you find it on
Just in
Pesach,
case-
it's something, even though it's a severe prohibition to eat chametz on Pesach. But since we all year long are eating chametz, so the sages were concerned, you're going to be hanging out in your house, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, look at that cookie over there. And you're going to go over and you're going to eat the cookie. Oh no, I just ate a cookie, God forbid, on Pesach. So in order to, because we're used to eating chametz all year round, right? One second. We're used to eating it all year round. So the sages said, since we're accustomed to it, we're used to it, so we're very scared that someone will accidentally eat chametz on Pesach. So therefore the sages said, to avoid that, we're going to be smart. What are we going to do? Before Pesach, we're going to do b'dikat chametz. We're going to search for chametz. And if we find it, then we're going to do what you said. We're going to destroy it. Are you with me?
Yeah, no, it's just funny. It's like this thought that like throughout the year before Pesach, people are just going around hiding something like under the couch and like
If
behind
you
the
do that in my
pillow.
house, you will face severe punishment.
It's like, why do you have to search? It should just be in one place. Who keeps their bread like in different places around the house?
Well, technically, by the way, you don't have to search somewhere where there was no reason to have assumed that any food was brought there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are you
unless
fine?
you have children, in which case you basically have to search everywhere.
Yeah.
But right, technically speaking, if your bedroom, you don't bring, there's normal people typically don't bring food in their bedroom. So from the strict letter of the law, you don't have to search your bedroom for chametz before Pesach. There's no chametz there. So you don't have to search for it. It would only be where places where you might find it. You had a question or comment?
I get very passionate about this, but I was gonna say, it's such an interesting idea because we don't have like lobster in our cabinet. Like, we don't, so like.
Not even in the
I
bathroom.
just No, not even.
Because that's where they could go.
Nowhere. We
Yeah.
have no chazer trade or anything like that
That's good.
anywhere.
Of course not.
So it's like it's such an interesting, like, different vibe because chametz we would have. Also,
We're used to it
yeah,
all year long. That's right. Okay. Now, so the Gemara says, like, they asked if Nachman Bar Yitzchak, well, we still get to the answer. The question was, if you rent a house to someone on the 14th of Nisan, also known as Erev Pesach, Al mi livdoik, upon whom is it incumbent to search for chametz? Is it incumbent upon the maskir, al hamaskir livdoik, that is upon the, is it incumbent upon the person who owns the property and is renting it out? After all, you might say the chamira didehu, because you might say if they happen to find bread or cookies or pretzels in that house, who does it belong to? It's his, right? It was his house and he's renting it out. So if I find a cookie in your house, it's probably yours. So maybe we would say that it's incumbent upon the actual owner of the property, the guy renting it out. He has to search. Why? Because the chametz that may or may not be there belongs to him. Maybe that's what we'd say. Or no, or maybe not. Or no, maybe not. Maybe we say, no, forget the owner. He's not even going to be there during Pesach. He's renting it to someone. They're Airbnb-ing it. So the guy who's Airbnb-ing that property, maybe he has to check for chametz. Why? The Isura B'Shusakoi. Because if they do find chametz there, guess whose property it's on? His, because he's renting it. So it's in what essentially would be his living room at that point. So maybe he has to search for it. He'll be living there during Pesach. So which one is it? Does the renter, how do you say it in English?
renty.
Renter is the guy who owns the property. and is
Rentee is the-
renting
No,
it
renter is the
out.
person that has, you're the renter of a property, you're the person that's.
Signed the lease.
Yeah.
And the rentee is the guy who actually owns it and is renting it out to you.
Other way.
Other way around, whatever. Maskir and
This is
soicher.
wrong.
Maskir means the guy who owns the property and is renting it to you. The soicher is the guy who's paying the money to rent it, the Airbnb. So which one is it? Let's bring a proof. You ready? Okay. Okay. Toshma, come in here. Come in here, by the way, means I'm going to give you a proof. By the way, the Zohar, when the Zohar wants to offer a proof for an idea, it does not say Toshma, come in here. It says Tochazi, come and see. Which, by the way, is the same thing as the Talmud Yerushalmi. The Jerusalem Talmud also says Tochazi, come and see instead of come in here. That's a class for another time. Why the Babylonian Talmud says come in here, but the Jerusalem Talmud says, and the Zohar say come and see. We'll get that to another time. Toshma, come in here. If you rent a home to someone else, you Airbnb your home. Sounds very similar.
It's like for free. Sorry.
No. Who has to put up the mezuzah? Your students. You're renting an apartment from someone, right? Who has to put up the mezuzah? So the answer is the guy who rents the house, the guy who's paying the Airbnb to rent the house. He must put up a mezuzah. Why? Yeah, fine. The one who's renting the house, it's his obligation. Here it says in English, the lessee, they call him. The lessee, as opposed the lessee and the lessor.
Yeah.
Apparently, we see from the case of Mezuzah that the person renting the house is obligated to do the mitzvah connected to the house. Which mitzvah? Mezuzah. So let's transplant Mezuzah and say, just like with Mezuzah, if you are renting a house, you are the lessee. The one who, the person renting the house is obligated to do the mitzvah for that house, aka Mezuzah. So let's just transplant the idea and say the same thing would go by Pesach. You're obligated to do the mitzvah for that house. In the case of before Pesach, it's checking for chametz. So the Gemara doesn't like that. The Gemara rejects that and says, no. Because, however, there in the case of Mezuzah, Rav Mesharshia says that a Mezuzah is what's called choivas hadar. It's the obligation of the resident, which means the owner of a house that no one lives in, technically speaking, does not have to fix a Mezuzah. So if the owner of the house continued to own the house at any point and doesn't live there, technically speaking, he does not have to put up a mezuzah. However, he would have to check for chametz, because all that matters with chametz is the ownership. It's a different topic. It's the ownership. So we reject the comparison to mezuzah, and in mezuzah, the obligation falls on whoever's living in the house. If you're not living in the house, you don't have to put a mezuzah there. Remember, it's beis secha, your house. Your house is someone who lives there. So if you own a house but don't live there, technically speaking, mezuzah not necessary.
What if you rent an Airbnb just for Pesach? Would you have to put up a mezuzah?
With the kosher.
I feel like no. Isn't it like
Do you
30
have to
days?
kasher the mezuzah? Do you have to kasher the kitchen? Absolutely. Do you have to put up a mezuzah? No, less than
30 days.
30 days. You don't have to put up a mezuzah.
So it has to be like an actual lease, not.
Like if you're renting an apartment as a student, let's say.
Yeah.
Here in Flushing, New York,
Yeah.
then you'd have to put up a mezuzah, right? But a short-term lease, no, mezuzah not required. Okay, let's see.
Why is it different for Pesach and Mezuzah?
Oh, great question. Why is Pesach checking for comments different than mezuzah? Yes,
One is positive, one is negative. So not
please explain a little bit more.
not having a mezuzah, you're not directly violating something that's in the Torah, but not having something in your house. That's covering it, low-key. If you passively don't check for comments, that is a direct, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't find one. That's a direct insert, they're right now.
Okay, I like the
Speak
direction you're
English.
thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's do
I don't
English.
understand.
I like the direction you're thinking. Let's look at this. Let's go back to the basics again. Why are we checking for comments before Pesach? What's the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish?
So that someone doesn't accidentally eat it from the house.
Or even own it. Because on Pesach, not only are we not allowed to eat leavened products, we're not even allowed to own them. Meaning, if I have a cabinet with my crackers in it, and I'm like, don't worry, I'm not eating it on Pesach, that's good, you're not eating it. But if you own it, God forbid, that's also a violation of the biblical law. So the sages are putting a fence around that by saying, in order to avoid violating that biblical law, which has severe consequences, we don't want to talk about punishments, but there's it's like the equivalent of eating on Yom Kippur, something that's unthinkable to many, right? Religious, non-religious people, unthinkable to many. So therefore we say, let's protect ourselves from that and check for chametz beforehand. So checking for chametz is a positive commandment. Most say it's rabbinic in nature, not biblical. Now, a mezuzah, technically speaking, do you have to buy a house in order to fulfill the mitzvah of mezuzah?
No.
No. Just be a vagabond your whole life. Live on a boat. I have an old friend who lives on a boat in Key West. Live on a boat. No big deal. You don't have a mezuzah. Be a vagabond. Ride your bike across the world. No problem. You can go your whole life without ever doing the mitzvah of mezuzah. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever done, but technically, is there anything wrong with that? Not really. No. The Torah says, write it on the doorpost of your house. What if you don't have a house, then okay, no problem. Okay. So the Gemara doesn't accept the comparison to mezuzah, because when it comes to checking for chametz, the bottom line is that whoever owns it is the one who's responsible for it. However, mezuzah is different. Mezuzah is not about ownership per se. Mezuzah is about living. So if you live in the house, one second, if you live in the house, you have to put a mezuzah. If you don't live in the house, you don't need a mezuzah. Whereas when it comes to the chametz, whoever it at that time owns the property, whether through actual ownership or through a lease, rental agreement, etc., he is the one obligated to check for chametz in that area. You had a question or a comment?
What if you live in a cave?
Does it have a doorway, doorpost, and a
It's
lintel?
it's like
Like
Bird?
the people, the echo chamber.
That's a doorpost.
You know what that
Yeah.
That makes sense when you were saying that, like whoever lives there at that time is responsible for checking, but I thought before it sounded like you were saying the opposite, like the owner has to check.
When I'm being turned out in the basement.
If it sounded that way, then I said it incorrectly.
Okay, but then it is basically the same as mezuzah, isn't it? Because for mezuzah, if you're living there, it's your job to put up the mezuzah, not the owner, it's the person who's renting it. And for some, it's the same.
Right. However, the difference is, it's good what you're asking. The difference is that let's say I have a house. Let's talk about mezuzah and then chametz. Let's say I have a house, I don't live in it. Do I need a mezuzah?
No.
Technically, no.
You're renting it.
1 second. I own the house, I don't live there. I'm just a rich guy, so I can have the house and I don't even use it. Yeah. Do I need a mezuzah? Technically not. If I don't live there, I don't need a mezuzah. But let's say I have that same house with no mezuzah, but I have crackers there.
Oh, boy.
That's a big.
No.
Because the problem is the ownership of the crackers, it's the crackers themselves are not the house.
Correct. It's a focus on the item of food itself versus the house. So when it comes to chametz, it doesn't matter where my chametz is in the world. If I own it, that's a problem. Has nothing to do with my house per se. Whereas the mezuzah is by definition connected to the property.
Oh.
Does it make any sense? A little bit more?
Yeah,
A little bit.
but you're saying, so, but that person who owns the house, who doesn't live there, even though no one lives, okay, well, if no one lives there, you're not gonna check for food,
He
right?
better, if he's at home, it's there, he better.
But why would there be food in a place that no one lives?
Let's say it's a vacation home, he goes there 2 days a year.
Okay.
So he technically, in a halakhic sense, doesn't live there, 30 days to live there.
Also, it doesn't even matter, theoretically, right? A lot of halacha deals with theoreticals. If theoretically I had crackers there, whether that actually is possible, it doesn't really matter for the sake of the discussion.
But then it's his job to check and not
Yeah.
the people who are renting it?
No, if you would rent it, then it's incumbent upon them.
Okay.
It's complicated, I get that. Yeah.
I was going to add an example that might be helpful. In school, back in the day when we had lockers and cubbies, not anymore, RIP. You had to clean out your cubby and locker. I never owned my locker in high school or middle school or my cubby in 5th grade and earlier. But I still have to get rid of that hummus. I wasn't even gonna be there. I was off. It was Pesach, obviously. But they still made us clean it out. Because.
Because you're renting it. I get it. Makes sense.
So altered grade.
I don't, oh, sorry.
But you were renting
Yeah.
it, so
Let's
like,
take,
Renting
you
it?
basically were, you said you were using it like the whole year.
Like, it was never, like, I didn't sign a lease saying this is my locker.
But you're using it, by all intents and purposes, you are renting it, whether you paid to rent it or not, it's yours for the time being.
by the way, it's a big issue, like, when yeshiva or seminary students are studying abroad in Israel. Or actually, yesterday, you guys know my Srili? I just signed him up for yeshiva next year, he's going to France. Yeah, so let's say he's in France, right? And they are, what, 6 hours ahead or so, something like that, right? Now he comes home for Pesach. What if he has cookies for his snacks in the yeshiva in Paris, and he's coming back to America?
Yeah.
That's a problem. He has to sell or destroy or eat all of those before Pesach because he owns them. It doesn't matter that it's in a different country. It doesn't matter if it's across the Atlantic Ocean. It's irrelevant. If you own it, then it's yours. In your house, out of your house, in your yeshiva, it makes no difference whatsoever.
Fall.
We're learning Torah.
Should I?
I can leave it.
Okay.
I don't care. I try not to interrupt Torah study whenever we can.
Well,
So.
if it's an emergency,
I think it's your word.
yeah.
You know, I'm old enough to remember when people did not have phones with them at all times. And if it's God forbid an emergency,
They're calling again, it might be an emergency. Or
it's not.
double die.
It's not.
Should I call
Who?
her?
Yeah.
So that you don't interrupt the shear, like we still.
Feel like it's too late.
I actually will always answer the phone when I'm learning Torah if it's my wife and my children. But she knows I'm giving the class right now. It's
So I
not,
was.
So it's
it's not an emergency. You know, it happened. It happened. It happened for many years that people were not accessible, didn't have phones on their person at all times, and life went on, and it was okay. And it was okay.
Okay, but if she calls a third time, I think we better answer.
Yeah, we better answer.
What is something that happened?
It's still ringing. Wow, she's really not.
No, WhatsApp calls go for a while, don't worry, don't worry.
Not if you hang
But-
up.
Okay, guys,
Just like, no, just ignore it.
this is why I need to get a different way to record my classes other than a phone. Because the phone rings, oh my God, Rabbi, your phone's ringing. Like, it's okay. It's okay. I was just exaggerating to get a point across. You know, it's like you go to shul. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna start because now you got me started. So you go to shul and people the phone. Oh my God, hello, they're answering the phone in shul. Honestly, what is the emergency that you must answer your phone in the middle of prayer? What's the emergency? What is so important? So maybe it's Baba. You went to shul, people my age, even younger, certainly older. You went to shul for years, and your wife couldn't call you because you were in shul, and your kids couldn't call you were in shul. Nobody called because you were in shul. And you know what? It was okay.
It's terrible.
It was okay. Nobody died, and it was fine. And when you got home, you found out that your wife said, "Oh, by the way, I wish that there had been invented already cell phones, so I could have called you to ask you to buy milk on the way home." But cell phones weren't invented yet, so I couldn't call. Trust me, these things are okay.
Yeah.
Dedication.
Torah study should have have a respect, should be elevated above the rest of the week and above the rest of the day. And the other things can come a little bit later. You know, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. Nothing's gonna. And by the way, if there's God forbid an actual emergency, you'll find out. It's okay. What are you gonna do anyway? What are you gonna do? I'm not in Hatzalah. I'm not. What am I gonna do?
No, yeah.
Even if I wasn't. But okay, Hatzalah is different. Hatzalah people that will always answer the phone or their whatever it's called, the walkie-talkie. It's different. But anyway,
Yeah.
now that we had that convenient little advertisement, commercial rather. Where are we now? I don't know where we are. What are we saying? What are we even talking about?
Say goodbye.
We don't have a lot of time yet left, so let's just see what we should.
We
do
would
for
come up with the difference
today.
between like chametz being focusing on the item and mezuzah being that you focus on.
Yeah.
Just saying, if you live anywhere, it doesn't matter where you live. If you
Chametz.
own chametz anywhere, then you have to get
Yeah.
rid of it.
Okay, well, let's just conclude for today with, on the last page, a passage from the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. It's in the laws of Mezuzah. Let's take a look at that. Shulchan Aruch Yoredeya, Reish Tzadik Aleph. That's section 291, Halacha 2. It says as follows: Hasoicher, and this is in the Code of Jewish Law by Joseph Caro, and this is the practical halacha. A little bit we just saw the Gemara, and we're discussing it a little bit. Hasoicher bais mechaveiro. If you are the lessee, you are renting a house, you're Airbnb-ing it. Hasoicher chayev likboya. Likboya ba mezuzah. Sorry, I got distracted by the words over there. Hasoicher chayev likboya ba mezuzah. The lessee, the guy renting it out, is obligated to fix a mezuzah. And he has to fix the place where, if it needs to be repaired a little bit to fix the mezuzah, etc., he has to do that. Even if you rented it on the condition, agreeing, hey, you got a mezuzah up already in that apartment, right? Yeah, I got the mezuzah up over there. Yeah, it's good. Don't worry. You don't have to bring your own mezuzah. I got that covered. And then you go into the Airbnb and you see, ain't no mezuzah. That guy gypped. He told me there was a mezuzah. There isn't one. So maybe, and we skipped this piece of the Gemara, by the way, just for time's sake. We're going to do the Gemara on, where is it? On Pesach Dalet base, which is at the top of this page. So let's say you enter the house, and then you say, oh my gosh, there's no mezuzah. The guy told me there was a mezuzah. Maybe you could call up the guy and be like, hey, you gypped me. You told me that there was a mezuzah, and I signed the lease. I gave you $1,000, and you told me there was a mezuzah, and there isn't a mezuzah. The lease is nullified. Maybe you could say that because it was you tricked me. So says the Shulchan Aruch, quoting from the Gemara, which is directly on the page above. No, loy hevi mekach taus. It is not considered a mistaken transaction. So you cannot nullify the transaction on the basis that he sold you something, so to speak, that you didn't actually get. Meaning you cannot say, I agreed to rent the property based on what you told me that it had a mezuzah, and it doesn't, so I'm out of the lease. No, it doesn't work that way. Why not?
It would be a little excessive.
Excessive, okay. Anyone else? Why not? Yeah.
So I know that there's a law saying that if somebody like makes a promise based on something and that something isn't true, then it doesn't actually count. But I
Okay.
don't think that this lease was sold like strictly like if there is a mezuzah, then you can rent the place. But if there isn't a mezuzah, then you don't get it. So I don't think it's that kind of contract. So it's like, oh, you're renting the place and I'll throw in a mezuzah for you. But if there isn't one, I don't think the whole contract is based on whether or not there is a mezuzah.
Okay. It's a good thought. Yes.
I think I remember learning in one of my business law classes, if the lease are acted in goodwill, like they didn't realize it was, I guess, expired or damaged or nullified, whatever it was, but they leased it to you anyway, and then later on you find out, then that makes sense not to be able to cancel the whole lease. And then also another thing is like it has to be a reasonable issue. Like it's I feel like it's the same thing as if like some of the windows had drafts in them also. It's like a similar thing. It's like,
Okay, so here's the difference. Here's the reason that the Gemara says, which we didn't read the Gemara just for, because we didn't have the time, but you can look at it on your own right above the page here. Here's the reason why it's not considered a mistaken transaction. Even though the guy misled you and told you there was a, but there isn't. Bottom line, people like doing mitzvahs. That's what the Talmud says. I get to do a mitzvah and put up a mezuzah. Great. Oh, it's going to cost me money. Great. What else is my money for? I like doing mitzvahs. I'm happy to spend money to do a mitzvah. So therefore, the transaction cannot be nullified based on the idea that it's a mistake. You misled me. You told me there was a mezuzah. The guy can say, yeah, I did. Okay, too bad. At the end of the day, a person, when he finds out he has the opportunity, not that he has to do a mitzvah, he gets to do a mitzvah. So the Talmud says, and brought in the code of Jewish law here, that since a person is happy to do a mitzvah, even if it costs him money, great. So there's no mezuzah? Awesome. That's just another opportunity for a mitzvah. Fantastic. And furthermore, the Shulchan Aruch continues. Now, when you leave your apartment, let's say you rent an apartment for a year and you put up a mezuzah as you're supposed to. Now, at the end of the year, your lease is over. You leave the apartment. You're not allowed to take the mezuzah down. You're supposed to leave the mezuzah up, presuming that a Jew is going to move in after you. Okay, that's enough for the question. Yeah.
I was also gonna ask, does this count if the leaser, like the owner of the property, isn't Jewish?
No,
Okay. I was wondering about that.
that's a good question.
What about the manager? Like the leaser?
Look at the next Shulchan. Read the next part of the Shulchan Aruch in the bold print. Skip
Oh.
the Rashi print. Ve'im socher abayis migoy. If you rented the house from a Gentile, or lugoy, then you could take the mezuzah. It's only if a Jew.
Okay.
It's only if either a Jew owns it or a Jew's going to be moving in afterwards. Interesting halach, by the way.
But why? But then you're taking away the opportunity for the next Jew to do a mitzvah.
That's a great question. So now you are allowed to tell the next Jewish tenant, listen, man, mezuzahs are expensive these days. So I'm not allowed to take the mezuzahs, but you have to pay me for them. So that you're allowed to do. You're allowed to say that he has to pay you for them. And if he really, really doesn't want to pay them, maybe then you could actually take them down. You could actually remove them. But it's a great question. The idea basically is that once the mezuzah is up, once it's affixed, so taking it down is a little bit drastic. It's like undoing a mitzvah. It's almost as if to say, I know I put up the mezuzah, now I'm taking it down. It's like drastic in a sense. So we don't want to get involved in that. Okay, so that is a little bit about mezuzah, a little bit about Pesach. I know there were many ideas that we batted around here, but what is the other mitzvah that also is connected to your doorway? Hanukkah. The mezuzah is on the right, the menorah is on the left. So we have connected to your door is your mezuzah, is your menorah, and is also the idea of checking for chametz. Even though ultimately they're not actually all that connected, but they're discussed in connection, and you should write them on the doorposts of your house. Your house is interpreted to mean your entry. Beisecha is bi'osecha, your entry, and the way we enter a house is using our right foot first. Or like if you go on an airplane, you go on a flight, many have the custom they put their right foot on the flight on the plane first. There's an idea of always putting the right first. According to Kabbalah, that represents chesed, kindness. And that's why you see also Hasidic Jews often that, if you buy a suit in the store, a man's suit, a button's left over right. Did you know that? Women's suits and jackets button right over left, men's button left over right. But if you notice, I have a button on the inside of my suit jacket so I can button it right over left. Because right is chesed and left is gevura, is severity, to put right over left. So anyway, the main thing is that we should all have lots of chesed. We should all have lots of right arm, right-handed things, lots of chesed, lots of kindness, lots of love. And we will continue, God willing, next week with the fourth installment of From Possuk to Possuk, Mezuzah edition. Thank you everyone for joining.